Our next speaker will be Moran Koren. We'll be talking about the one-shot crowdfunding game.
Hi. Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk to you about crowdfunding. This is a work I've been working on with Itai Arieli and Rans Moradinsky. And basically, the first thing I want to talk about, I know everybody here knows what is crowdfunding, but I want to put it in the context of what I'm going to present. So before we had crowdfunding, this guy, Mark, who wanted to sell pre-cooked vegetarian meals to his friends and assumed he needs $25,000 for this cost, would have to go to the bank, ask for a loan, and only then he could meet his potential consumers. And if everything goes right, we had pre-cooked vegan meals. In the last couple of years, there was a new funding method that was born, which is called crowdfunding, which basically means that this guy can now put his idea in some sort of cool video. This is not a very cool video. There are much better videos of crowdfunding. Ask the public for a small fee, for example, pre-purchase or something like this. And if the total contributions achieved the goal he set previously of $25,000, then the money is collected. And if everything else goes well, then the product is manufactured. So basically, instead of going to an investor, he goes to the market. And in this work, we focus mainly on the side of the market, of how these small contributors behave. So what is the main purpose of crowdfunding? As I said, it's, and if anybody remembers the South Park episode, it's basically to raise as much money as possible, get funding for your product. This is the obvious case. But as I will try to convince you guys, this is not the only use case of crowdfunding. And we'll do it using a small survey and examples. Presenting the ostrich pillow. This is something that in my last flight over here, I wish I had. How many people here would like to have this product at home? By show of hand. During conferences, doing my talk specifically. Right now, how many will? Okay, so we have about 10% of the room. I was hoping for a higher percentage. How many people were willing to pre-buy this product, to fund this, to think this can be? Okay, so about half of the people who voted that they want the product actually believe this product is viable. Let's look at another example. The meat soap. Who doesn't want soap who smells like bacon? Sorry to all my vegan friends, but you had Mark earlier, so we're balanced. How many people here think this is a good product? One. I'm surprised. How many people would think this is a viable business product and would invest in this product, would pre-buy it? Zero.
You mean to make money or to use it?
To use it. Who doesn't want his hand to smell like bacon? Well, surprise, surprise, both of these products passed the crowdfunding filter. Both of them had successful campaigns, which leads to the questions. So the second thing crowdfunding is used for is basically to get the market demand for some product. For example, here we have a writer who's writing a book, and an app producer, an app designer who designs an app, and we have Obama who wants to raise money to fix America infrastructure. Basically, all of these are public goods in a way, and the total valuation of them is unclear. It's not clear if fixing the infrastructure is worth the money invested into it. So this is more, so these two case studies are in our mind when we build the model and we run through the analysis. Now, the previous literature usually focused on the first one, which is basically if we have an entrepreneur who fakes and sells soap meat, and how does this varies with different parameters. This is the second one. And the third one also shows that there is some sort of oversubscription in crowdfunding, and tries to explain it using a slightly more game theoretic model. Now, all of these had one simple assumption, that if people only contribute if they think the product is good, and they basically follow their own signal, their own private information, which is basically what we are trying to, we kind of rattle this assumption. We study it. So our main question is, are crowdfunding campaigns efficient? Which leads to the first question, what is efficient? We have two goals. We'll see this. How is this the efficiency that will show later on is affected by strategic contributor behavior, and what happens when the population size increases. I mean, we can say that it's true that if you have a small campaign, efficiency might, crowdfunding may not be efficient, but if I elicit millions of users, then I achieve efficiency. Then, as we showed, this is not the case. And to see how the parameters of the crowdfunding campaign affect this this still undefined efficiency. So the order of the presentation is going to be as follows. First, I'm going to talk about the second point. This is, and then I'm going to talk about efficiency, and take it from there. So our basic model is a model of is a static model of a game theoretical model of a public good, which is excludable. Now we say that there are two states of nature. So we take the whole side of the firm and the entrepreneur as a given. It's in the side. We'll see how it goes into the model, and we see only how the contributors behave. So the product can be either of high quality or of low quality, either good or bad. There are n identical contributors, which can either contribute or opt out. We will look at mixed strategies, which means they can assign a probability to contributing. And the campaign, the threshold enters the model, like the crowdfunding part enters the model through a price and a threshold, which basically means that if the product is ex post good, and my valuation will be 1 minus the price I've paid. If the product is meat soap, it will be 0 minus the price I paid. Now, these utilities will only transpire if the product is, if the threshold is reached, and if I chose to participate, which basically lowers my risk from the alternative case where I would buy it in the store and my action would be binding immediately. And this has a severe effect on, a major effect on the results. The valuations are normalized to 0 and 1. It works in almost any valuations you will take. Okay. So the players base their decision on two sources of information. Once, when I said meat soap, everybody knew it was probably a good, bad product. This is the public prior. Two, each player receives some sort of private signal over the quality of the good. For example, if somebody really likes bacon, no one in this room, he might think this is a good product, even though it's not. It's not. It's not. So we assume that these private signals are noisy, but on average they are correct. For example, if I would have a vote, it will reach the true state, and the signals are IID. Okay. So as I said, we're looking at mixed strategies. We're looking for Bayesian-Nash equilibria in mixed strategies, and we are looking for symmetric settings, in the sense that if I received a low signal and somebody else received a low signal, we'll choose the same strategy. Yes?
About the pre-assigned payoffs, so you're sort of assuming that people are benefiting from just the product being in the world rather than having equity in the product?
I'm not looking at equity crowdfunding. It is a very interesting extension to this. I'm looking more of a reward crowdfunding. From owning the product, for example. If I pre-bought the meat soap, I will receive a meat soap at home, and I will have great valuation and enjoyment from watching my friends use this terrible product. No externalities in the model ever. So, but I couldn't think of any other reason to buy this thing. Okay. Now, when we look at the symmetric strategies, Bayesian-Nash equilibria in symmetric strategies, it's very compelling to go to the Nash existent theorem and use all sort of pre-results. But the problem is that we have a symmetric, so as long as I need at least 2 people to buy the product, I have a symmetric Bayesian equilibrium where nobody buys the product. Because if nobody else buys the product, my utility is 0. And if I switch from not buying to buying, my utility is still 0. So here comes the first problem that we've encountered. We basically are looking only on equilibria where there is a positive probability that the product will be already. Oh, man. Fast forward. OK. The product will be made. OK? So the first thing we show is that basically, no matter what the size of the population is, there can be at most one symmetric non-trivial Nash equilibria. And this equilibria is, if it exists, then basically it will allow us to use the asymptotic analysis that we'll see later on. But it doesn't always exist. Luckily, something that interests us is looking at large games. And the way we do it, the large game, is basically we're looking at a sequence of thresholds which grows with the population. For example, think of the sequence. No matter what the population size is, half of the people have to contribute. Okay, so if the population is 10, we require 5 contributions. If it's 5 million, we require 2.5 million contributions, or 10 and 5. So it turns out that no matter what the price is, no matter how high or low the price is, no matter what the high or low the prior is, or any of the parameters, if the game is sufficiently large, we will always have a non-trivial Bayesian Nash equilibrium. And from the first part of the theorem, we know that it is, in fact, the only one that there is. Okay? Now, it's true that there is only one, but the one that for every set of parameters we'll have one equilibrium, but this equilibrium is affected by the parameters of the model. So we denote these two threshold prices, which is basically the distribution of the product being good if I saw a low signal, and the distribution of it being high if I saw the high signal. And basically what it means intuitively, if the price is lower than PL, even if I received the low signal and my action is binding, I will still buy the product. Okay? I mean, it's terrible, but it's still cheap enough for me to experiment on it. And if it's higher from pH, then if we didn't have crowdfunding, no one would like to buy the product because it's too expensive. And surprise, surprise, we divided the games into 3 sets of prices: cheap, moderate, and expensive. And as we see, the equilibrium strategy and efficiency results differ very much between these 3 types of games. So as I said before, when we don't have crowdfunding and the price is very cheap, everyone will contribute, which means that we have no information aggregation, nothing will be revealed, and it will be a very boring game. No efficiency gain or losses due to crowdfunding. Now, the interesting part starts when we talk about moderate and expensive prices. Now, what happens here is that we see that the high players, if I receive the high signal, I will always contribute, but I will also assign positive probability for contribution if I receive the low signal. And what is the intuition behind this? I wanted to do a survey, but I don't have time. So the intuition behind this is simple. We call it the social insurance of crowdfunding. Let's say I want the ostrich pillow, but I'm not sure that the business model is viable. So I will not invest if I had to invest in this company. But if I see that they want the participation of 1,000 other people, then I know that if I invest, the product will be manufactured and I will be charged for it only if there are 999 other people who want the product. So I say, most likely they are right and I'm wrong, so I assign some probability to this distribution. When I am strategic, I deploy strategy and I condition my decision on the fact that the product will be made. And when expensive prices is where we have the problem of existence, and we'll go deeper into it later. Because in expensive prices, there are cases where the high players also don't participate. Okay, so when you look at large games, we can also characterize the prices accordingly. And what we can see is basically that as the threshold, I remind you that the threshold is the Q is basically the asymptotic threshold. As the threshold varies, so does the amount of the probability people assign to the action of contributing. And basically, what they do is they assign more so that the probability of the product being produced when it's bad will be fixed. This comes from the indifference of from the indifference condition in each one of the equilibria. And what is great about these results are basically, we'll still go through the result of the model. So high threshold reduce the participation risk and serve as social insurance. This is what I've just explained. Players with low signal may contribute, so campaigns with poor quality product may succeed, and this happens even when the size of the population is infinite. The probability of success is fixed over a range of thresholds due to the condition, due to the player's strategic choice, which means if the threshold is half or the threshold is 3/4, the probability that the campaign succeeds and that it's good or bad, given that it succeeds, is the same, which is something quite remarkable, I think. And we can have the cases of oversubscription, like campaigns that go way above the threshold, only if the product is actually good, which is some sort of empirical thing we can check. So if I see something that is 5,000% over the threshold, probably the product was good to begin with. And if I see something that almost crossed the threshold, it is bad. And we see a lot of products that are around this threshold. So I have about 3 minutes about efficiency. So as we saw earlier, we have 2 goals for crowdfunding. One of them is to attract market traction, as many as possible. And the other was to produce the product only if it's good. So we defined 2 separate efficiency measures. One of them we call the correctness of the mechanism, which is basically the probability of succeeding given that the state is good, plus the probability of failing times the probability that the state is bad. And again, as we can only characterize the behavior for large games, we take the best possible sequence of threshold as n grows large, which means I'm basically, when I'm looking at asymptotic games, I'm looking at the best possible scenario. And what we find is, forget about theorem 4. As I said, in cheap prices, the information is not released, so we have exactly the prior. But in all other cases, basically what we have here is we have some sort of oversubscription. Basically what happens is that this expression is always smaller than 1. This is due to the social security, social insurance aspect we saw previously. Now, as for the correctness, we see that if the price is not cheap, then there is always some information released. Even in large games, there is always a positive probability of a mistake, which is unlike majority voting or other results from the voting literature, and that the correctness increases in the price and decreases in the quality of signal and of the qualifiers, which means beware of popular products and be optimistic towards expensive products. They will most likely be correct. The second one is the market participation index, which is basically the expected number of people who will eventually buy the product, conditional on its being produced. Again, in large games, we look at the best possible sequence. Now here again, if the price is cheap, everybody will buy. If the price is moderate or expensive, we see this expression, which I'll go deeper into it. Basically what happens, I'll skip this one. In expensive prices, it's a little bit more complicated. But basically what happens is that we will always have more people contributing than in the case where we didn't have crowdfunding. And this number is always smaller than 1. Expensive prices decrease the participation, and the popularity of the product increases it. Now, the weird thing is that as long as the price is not expensive, the quality of the signal decreases the participation. And this is the intuition behind it, is that basically the low type agents are less confident of their signal, and so they utilize the social insurance aspect more. Let's return to the case studies. I'm sure you missed the meat soap. So basically what I'm saying is, if the price is more expensive, it's most likely that the product will be produced eventually. If we have oversubscription, the product will be good eventually. And we can see that the goal is the number of backers is significantly higher, but as we know, this doesn't necessarily affect efficiency. This was it. Thank you.
Any questions? So what about in the case where they're like correlated like signals? So you made this assumption that there's a bit of IID.
Yes. So if the signals are correlated, signals are correlated, but not conditionally. Yeah. So if the signals are correlated conditionally, I think that it will cause to less social insurance but it still will be positive unless, of course, the correlation is something extreme. So it will change the intensity of the results, but not the nature of them.